Welcome to Native Talk Arizona, Native Health's Native American Cultural Affairs program, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. And I'm Susan Levy. And in the studio with us today is Tara John, and she's a registered dietitian at Native Health. Each November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, and it's time to bring attention to diabetes and its impact on the many millions of people that are afflicted with this. So welcome, Tara. We're super excited to have you here, talk about what you do, Diabetes Awareness Month, and Indigenous foods, too. So,
yay, I'm excited. Well, thank you for having me today.
So before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, everyone. My name is Tara. So, yat she Tara John Yunxie. Nakadina English, Bashistin, but Atni Deshiche, Tachini Deshinale. I always like to start out my introduction with my clans, so that way I can go ahead and let everyone know, who I am and where I'm from. But my name is Tara. I'm Navajo. I'm a registered dietitian, and I work here at Native Health. As far as my background, I actually grew up here in the Valley, so this is where I consider my home. And then as far as my background information is concerned, I went to school at Arizona State University, where I earned my undergrad in nutrition and dietetics. And after I graduated, I worked for several places. I worked at WIC for a little bit as a diet tech. And after WIC, I worked with Salt River. I can't even say enough about that job. That's where I developed confidence. I developed a real interest in using indigenous ingredients when I'm cooking. And that job really motivated me to make sure that I become a dietitian. After I worked there, I applied for an internship. So as far as becoming a registered dietitian, it is a process.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So you complete your undergrad, right? At least when they actually changed the process recently, and I can talk a little bit more about that too. But for me, you have to complete a number of courses, your prerequisites. And after you complete your prerequisites, you actually have to submit in a portal, and you have to pick where you would like to apply. So these are actually internships that you pay for. So, wow. Yeah, it's you pay for it, and it's actually unpaid. So luckily, though, I was able to secure a spot at the Southwestern Dietetic Internship just right up the street at PIMC. And this one is actually one that you don't have to pay for. So I got accepted into that internship. And the internship process, at least there, was from August all the way up until March. And during that time, you complete several rotations. So you complete a nutrition management rotation, you complete a clinical rotation. They sent us out to Pinyon to do our nutrition community rotation. And then you also have to do a food service rotation. And you do have to make sure that you complete and pass each rotation with at least an 80% or higher.
Do you take a test?
You do take a test at the end. So after you pass your
internship modules, okay,
and everything, and you get signed off, and they sign off and say yes, this person is ready to take the exam. Then you take your RD exam, and it's pretty strenuous. It's a very hard, for me, I found it to be the most challenging part about earning my license. It took me about 6 months to study for the exam, and I didn't pass until my third attempt.
It's very rigorous.
It is really challenging. And, luckily I had a lot of support from my preceptors at PIMC. And then on top of that, I also had a lot of support from my family as well. So they definitely kept me motivated and kept me going.
So you're an RD now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you've been at Native Health, I know, for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So we're super excited you're here. I know you mentioned that at Salt River, you got really interested in Indigenous cooking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll start off with that part before we talk about Diabetes Awareness Month. So how did you get interested in nutrition, like nutrition, diabetes education, Indigenous foods? Is it like something in your family or just, I don't know?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. So as far as nutrition is concerned, I think the seed got planted when I was 10 years old. So when I was 10 years old, I had my canalda. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's a coming of age ceremony. And it's usually when a woman starts her menstruation cycle. And during that time, you're actually considered to be holy. And one of the things that they had mentioned to me is that I wasn't allowed to eat anything with any sugar or anything processed. Everything had to be like as much traditional as possible. And just that word itself was so new to me. I wasn't too sure as far as like what traditional foods were. I was just really confused about that whole concept of traditional foods.
Well, you were 10.
When I was 10.
Right, when you were 10. So that's like fifth graders.
And so I kind of thought to myself, like, okay, well, I guess like I can only eat mutton and fry bread until I have the day of the ceremony, which was pushed out for 3 months. And so I wasn't sure what to eat. And
you were 10.
And I was 10. And I was 10 years old. And so that definitely left its mark in me. And from that moment on, I always tried to, even though it was, kind of annoying at times, but my family was always very supportive. I would always try to ask, like, what do you mean by traditional foods? Like, what is this? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. But basically, they said, like corn, some blue corn mush, and some fruits, and that was pretty much it. And I think that's where the idea of nutrition and traditional foods really got planted in me. And then
that's a big seed.
Yeah,
when you're 10.
Yeah, and then it did grow once I got into school. So the plan was actually nursing. That was my goal. My goal was to become a nurse. And in that process, I actually took a nutrition class because that was one of the prereqs for nursing school. And when I sat in the class, the professor introduced herself and said that she was a registered dietitian and talked a little bit about what she was able to do and what she did inside of the clinic. And then from that moment on, I just kept thinking like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that you could do this. Like this could be your career where you could merge nutrition and food and also medical all in one realm. And so from that moment on, I went ahead and doubled up on my courses. So I still did the nursing prereqs, but on top of that, I made sure to do the nutrition ones too, because I thought in the back of my mind, like, the registered dietitian, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. And
that's
then
cool.
Yeah. So and then once I got hired on at Salt River, like that was it. Like that was just what is that saying? That last nail or whatever it is, that nail or something in the headboard.
Yep.
I don't know how that saying goes, but that was like the final straw. And once I got hired on there, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a registered dietitian.
So what did you do at Salt River?
At Salt River, I was their community health educator for their diabetes prevention services.
So is that under SDPI?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for our listeners that don't know, that's special diabetes program for Indians,
Mm-hmm.
under Indian Health Service. So what kind of recipes or what did you teach people? And were these people that were at risk for diabetes or individuals with diabetes, or was that not even a factor? Was it just talking about nutrition and cooking?
I did a lot of my supervisor definitely gave me a lot of flexibility in what I was able to do. So just as long as it was something that fell under the guidelines of what we were able to teach, she definitely let me do it. There were a couple of curriculums that we did utilize. And yeah, so I would basically teach classes on diabetes education. I would teach about nutrition, diabetes self-management. The other things that I was able to do too is I was able to do food demonstrations and also put together some recipes as well.
So I know that you're helping us with our Food for Thought program and doing the videos here and helping on a lot of our food demos. What kind of food demos did you do at Salt River, and what kind of indigenous foods did you use?
The one that I did that I was most proud of was a blue corn mush, which a lot of people are probably pretty familiar with. And just because, with that one, I was able to really make it my own. I was able to source the ingredients. I was able to talk about the benefits of calcium. I was also able to talk about how that food is important to me and significant to me as well. So that was probably my most favorite one. And the nice thing about this one too is I felt like it was something that was easy enough to incorporate with kids as well. And they always got a kick out of like the color and blue, and they were like, I get to eat blue foods.
So with the blue corn mush, it's the juniper ash, correct, that is high in calcium? And that also turns it blue. Is that correct?
It does help with the blue color. And then one thing I did find out too is that I've actually been making it incorrectly for the longest time. I didn't know that you were supposed to heat up the water first and then add the juniper ash to get it activated.
Oh.
And then you add, like after you let it heat up, then you add the blue corn.
So when you were doing it at Salt River, what did you do to make it your own? Did you add anything, or was it strictly just not plain, but blue corn mush, or did you add any, nuts or seeds or fruits or anything else?
So for the first lesson, when I did it, I pretty much just kept it very simple with using the juniper ash and the blue corn mush, just because the juniper ash I felt like was a pretty new ingredient. But then when I made it with the kids, then I added in, some fruits and some nuts and seeds that they could add to it themselves. And then the other nice thing that I was able to do with this lesson too is that we were able to talk about the different foods that corn is used in. And a lot of kids and a lot of kids were really surprised to find out that the blue corn is the same thing in tortillas and in chips as well.
Oh yeah.
So
different forms of corn.
So yeah, and then they always like to see what the corn looks like on the cob before it gets grounded up.
Oh, the blue corn, which is beautiful. What about making anything? I was just thinking about this. Do you ever make anything savory with blue corn mush? And not on the sweet side?
Well, I mean, sometimes I won't add any sugar to it, and I'll just add, a little bit of salt. So that way it's a little bit on the savory side. But as far as savory dishes, that's probably the most that I can think of with it.
Okay.
With
the thinking outside the box, like, we never talked about adding anything to it, like pumpkin or squash or Three Sisters. I don't know. I wonder if there's something to do with that. I don't know.
I mean, there is. I heard a dumpling stew. And I think it is in a cookbook, I believe, where they make a dumpling stew with blue corn.
Okay, we'll have to check that one out.
Yeah.
So what other indigenous ingredients do you like to work with?
As of lately, the two favorite ones that I really enjoy right now is mesquite. So
I know you were playing around with mesquite and I think brownies.
In brownies, and then also in pancakes too. So that one I've been having quite a bit of fun with and using, just because it has like that sweet flavor. And one thing that I am trying to figure out is trying to make a coffee with it, or trying to mix it in with coffee somehow, like maybe a latte or...
So let's go back to the mesquite. So, we obviously have a lot of mesquite trees here. So then you just go to your tree in the backyard, pull off the mesquite pods. Do you grind them? Do you steep them? Do you put them in the blender? I don't know. What do you do with them? What do you do? How do you either forage and then get it down and make it into a usable form?
So as far as that process is concerned, at least how it was explained to me when I sat in on some classes, is that some people will put a blanket out underneath their mesquite tree, because not all mesquite is the same. You want to make sure that it's a mesquite that is local here and local to to Phoenix, because there are different types of mesquites.
I did not know that. Okay.
And then they'll put a sheet down on the ground, and then they'll wait for them to the pods to fall, so
Right.
that way it doesn't touch the ground. And then they'll dry them out. And some people will actually put them inside of the oven too to sort of bake them.
So like with the pod on it, or take the pod off?
The entire thing. So they'll put
with the
entire-
pod. They just pop it in the oven? Okay.
They just pop it in the oven. And the reason that you want to do that is because there are little bugs that lay eggs inside of it, and they're called weevils. And you want to do that before they hatch and make the little holes, on them. So you want to make sure that you bake them or dry them out before that happens. You do, because when we tried it at home, we didn't do that, and our house actually got infested with weevils.
Okay, that's a good lesson. So dry them out. Extra protein. The extra protein, though. All right, so then once you bake them, then you take the pods off, and then what do you do with the seeds? Then do you pulverize it, or?
So it's actually not the seeds that you use. It's the husk on the outside that you grind up.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did not know that either. So it's the pod, not the, right?
Yeah, it's the pod on the outside. It's
That
not
you're
the seeds.
using, not the seeds. Mm-hmm. And then what do? Pop that in a blender and just pulverize it?
You can if your blender's strong enough. So you can put it in a blender and then blend it up. And then it does turn into a coarse powder. And then what you can do from that point on, too, is you could go ahead and continue to blend it more and then run it through a sifter. So that way you're able to take out the larger pieces. So you have something a little bit more fine.
So is that, and then that's your mesquite powder, right?
That's your mesquite flour, correct?
Flour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And I know when we talked about some of the recipes here, and we ordered that because we didn't have any. Mm-hmm. That's what we were buying, right? Mm-hmm. Was the flour from doing that. Okay. All right. So that's your first favorite indigenous ingredient right now. What's your second one?
The second one is the sumac berry
Okay.
that I've been using. So
Is that local?
this one was from New Mexico. And so this is one that I actually grew up eating. And it's a tiny little red berry, and it grows on trees.
Do they grow out here? Like on the sumac trees out here?
That I'm not too sure.
Okay. Okay. Mine don't turn. I have a sumac tree. I don't know if it's the same thing. I'll have to check.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think there might be different types.
Okay.
But this one is it's a berry that does grow, and this one was picked and harvested from the mountains in New Mexico. And it does have it's kind of a sour flavor, the flavor that it has, but at least from the videos that I watched, they will pick it when it dries out. And then what they'll do next is they'll just grind it up. And how I make it is I make it with sumac berries and flour. And then it turns into like more of a pudding consistency. And then I'll add a little bit of sugar to it.
So you make a pudding with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's a lot of things you can do with it, right?
They're
Sweet and savory?
Yeah, I have heard. I mean, I know when I was passing it around here, someone had mentioned that they have used sumac berries and like added it to salads or sprinkled it on kebabs. And then one person had mentioned that it kind of has like a similar flavor to tamarind. I think I'm saying that correctly.
Tamarind?
Yeah, and which I thought was
Like tahini?
I'm not too sure about tahini, but it was they did mention the tamarind, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I thought and that's also part of the reason that I like to use traditional ingredients and let people try it, just because it does bring up a lot of really fun conversation, and then also, connects everyone too. And so that one I thought was really neat to pass around and have people try it. And they were sharing their own personal experiences as well.
So where do you find like your inspiration and recipes? I know like the mesquite flour that you're working with the brownies, I know that was kind of your creation. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like other things, do you have like cookbooks? Do you have websites that you go to, social media? Do you kind of dream about it and say, hey, when I'm thinking about making a, blue corn stew or...
So with the mesquite, that was more of Salt River. So they're definitely the ones that help plant the seed for that, because it's something that they do use. That's it's one of their traditional foods. And then with the sumac berries, I think that was just more of something that my grandma had used. And I didn't even know, like, I couldn't even remember the name of it. I just remember sharing it with someone when I was doing the blue corn mush recipe. I kept talking about like something that my grandma adds, so she used to mix with it. It was something red and it was spicy. And for the longest time, I actually thought it was a chili chipine. And and then I remember adding it to it, like grinding it up and adding it to it and thinking like, this isn't the taste. Like, this isn't what I remember as a kid. And then someone during that blue corn mush class said, and I could be pronounced, I've been working on this pronunciation, but chichin. And when they said it, like, it just like a light bulb just went off on my head, and I knew right away, like, that's it. That is it.
That's awesome.
And so I went ahead and did some research, and I was able to find it finally just a couple of months ago on a website that, and they're the ones that made it, or they're the ones that they're the ones that picked it and sourced it, and it was from Valley Trading Post.
Yeah, that's where we get some of our, that's where we get a lot of things. So you just find your inspiration in lots of different places, right?
Yeah, lots of people, or sometimes my memories.
But hey, listen, that's the best way. Connections with people and with your family and your heritage. So for our listeners, how would you recommend that people start? One, are Indigenous foods healthy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would consider them for sure healthy. I mean, not even on a nutritional level, but also on a cultural level. And then on top of that, there is a sense of connectiveness to all of them. That one food, chichin, like sharing it with everyone. Everybody was able to share a story. Everybody was able to share a memory, or find a way to make it all cohesive and connective, and that's something that I do really, really like and value about traditional foods.
So you would recommend that people, if they can, incorporate some traditional foods into their diet?
Yeah, incorporate traditional foods, or even learn about some of the stories about some of these traditional foods too. Yes, definitely learning about some of the traditional stories as well.
Do you find that from an RD perspective, registered dietitian, do you find that there's a lot of nutritional benefits with these Indigenous ingredients? I know you mentioned like the blue corn mush, the blue corn, and the juniper ash with the calcium, but do you find a lot of them have a lot of significant nutritional benefits?
Yeah, so the sumac berries are a good source of vitamin C, and then on top of that too, the mesquite is also a good source of fiber as well. So I do find that a lot of these, at least from the research that I've done, that these traditional foods, they are beneficial for overall health and nutrition.
I don't know. I keep thinking about your mesquite. One, I didn't know that it's the pod. Two, I didn't know you needed to bake it. And is it high in protein, or do you happen to know any of the nutritional benefits for the mesquite flour?
For one, it is a good source of fiber. There may be some other benefits as well. And if you want to learn more about them, I always encourage asking your elders too, because that is, they are very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
In
a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? The older I get, the more I realize that they definitely have all the wisdom and knowledge and knowledge keepers.
We'll continue with Tara John's interview after this short break. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health provides primary medical, dental, behavioral health, WIC, and wellness services for the urban Native American community. For more information, call 602-279-5262 or visit our webpage at nativehealthphoenix.org. Native Talk Arizona returns after this song. You're listening to The Lake Inside the Flower by R. Carlos Nakai, William Eaton, and Will Klipman.
Okay, so I want to go back to November is Diabetes Awareness Month. So one, what is diabetes for people that are not familiar, and what are the signs and symptoms?
So type 1 diabetes is thought to be caused by an autoimmune reaction. So this reaction stops your body from making insulin. So that's type 1 diabetes. And then with type 2, this is when your body doesn't use the insulin well and can't keep your blood sugars at normal levels. So this usually takes time to develop. And then gestational diabetes develops in pregnant women. And if you have gestational diabetes, your baby could be at higher risk for health problems. Gestational diabetes usually goes away after your baby is born. However, it increases your risk for type 2 diabetes later in life. Usually it does go away after baby is born, but sometimes you just want to make sure that you check in with your provider and get checked up again to make sure that your blood sugars are under control.
So if somebody is, are they treated, well, let's exclude the gestational diabetes. So, but if you're type 1 and type 2, are they treated the same? Like I had a friend whose son was diagnosed with type 1 when he was very little, like under a year old, and had a pump and the whole thing. Do they do that with type 1 and type 2?
I mean, as far as that, you would want to make sure that you talk to your provider about that one. Nutrition-wise, usually there is a little bit of a difference when you're talking to someone who has type 1 versus type 2. With type 1, there is a little bit more focused on carb counting just because of their medication and their insulin regimen. But usually with type 2, like there is a little bit of carb counting, but for the most part, it's not going to be as it's not as structured. It's not as structured, yeah. Okay. I mean, there's some structure, but it's not as structured as with type 1, at least from a nutrition perspective.
Okay. So what are some signs or symptoms? If somebody thinks, I don't know, what would the signs or symptoms be if you think you might have diabetes or something to look out for?
So one thing to keep in mind is always having your annual checkup and having your A1C done.
Okay, but what's an A1C for those people that don't know?
So your A1C is having your average blood sugars. It's an average of your blood sugars for the past 3 months. So whenever you look at your lab values, taking a look at that A1C number and checking to see what the number is. And then as far as the signs and symptoms, some people will experience signs of high blood sugars, so frequent thirst, frequent urination, and then signs and symptoms of low blood sugar could be night sweats or even feeling shaky. However, again, the best way to check and see if you do have type 2 diabetes is following up with your provider, making that appointment and getting checked up.
So what if you're kind of don't want to make that appointment? Is that important? Is it important? And can some damage lead, or if unchecked diabetes or pre-diabetes, if that's unchecked, can that lead to some further complications down the road?
So it is important to make that appointment. It's important to go. It is important to get checked. Only a provider can make that diagnosis, so it is important to get checked.
I just know people that don't like to go to providers.
Yeah.
They would rather stick their head in the sand. Okay. All right. So if someone has diabetes, what are some tips to make meal planning easier? Would you think like meal prep? Is that useful? Is that help with carb counting and figuring out your calories for the week? And also nutritionally. I mean, I do meal prep and it helps. It takes a lot of time on Sunday, but I think it's worth it. Mm-hmm. What's your advice on that?
So if you are newly diagnosed, one thing that can be helpful is making an appointment with your provider and then also making an appointment with your dietitian.
Which would be you.
Yeah, which would be me.
All right.
But there are some really helpful resources online. One that can be really helpful is on the American Diabetes Association. They actually have a nutritional food hub. And with that one, if you create an account, you can create a meal plan. And they have a list of all these different types of recipes, and you can actually pull the recipe into your weekly calendar, and then it'll help you generate a meal plan and then a grocery list as well.
So you are doing meal prep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the other thing too that can be really helpful is My Native Plate or the plate method.
Mm-hmm. Which is on IHS, right?
Which is on IHS, yeah.
So it's like ihs.gov, and then you would search My Native Plate, I believe,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are so for those people that are not familiar with the My Plate, how is the the My Native plate different or portioned, or what does it say, since we don't have visuals on a radio show?
Oh yeah, so the plate method actually, it's based off of a plate that's 9 inches across.
Okay.
So visualize a plate in front of you that's 9 inches across.
That's sort of big, sort of not big, but okay.
And then so half of that plate is a non-starchy vegetable. So that's going to be things like broccoli, tomatoes, cucumbers, your leafy green vegetables, like kale, lettuce, and also your summer squash, like your zucchini and your yellow squash. So those are all the different, and your green beans. So those are all the different types of foods that you want to make half your plate. So at least 2 fist sizes is what you want to aim for. And then the other quarter of the plate is going to be your carbohydrates. So that's going to be things like your starchy vegetables, like your potatoes, your corn, and your peas, and then your winter squash. So things like pumpkin, your gourds or your acorn squash. And then the other things that'll go into that category too are going to be more of your grains. So things like your rice, your beans, your lentils, and legumes. So that's going to be a quarter of your plate. And so that is...
That's like a healthy plate so far. So I'm waiting for the mac and cheese or something else to come in. And I'm not hearing that yet.
So you can do mac and cheese. So yeah, so the pastas as well.
Okay, all right.
The pasta, so that's going to be a quarter of your plate, and that's about the size of your fist.
Okay.
And then the other portion is going to be your protein. So that's going to be things like your fish, your chicken, your pork. And the portion size for that is going to be about the size of a deck of cards or the palm of your hand. And then the other thing to keep in mind, too, when you're putting together this plate is a healthy fat, because fats are beneficial.
Right.
Fats are, we do need to make sure that we're incorporating, we are incorporating them into our meals. It does help with hormone regulation, and it does, and it makes the food taste better, too.
Okay, what's a healthy fat, though?
So like olive oil or avocado oil, or even, more of our plant-based oils, with the exception of coconut oil. Coconut oil is a saturated fat. So
that's a no.
So trying to minimize that as much as possible.
Okay, and butter's a no, or minimize it.
And minimize that as much as possible, yeah.
Okay. So avocado oil, olive oil.
And your vegetable oils.
And vegetable oils. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Then, okay, so the next thing, so that's your plate. That's a lot of vegetables. Mm-hmm. Seasonings, I assume, would be recommended.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Salt, pepper, even if you want to saute it in a little bit of butter, just as long as it's getting you to eat a little bit more vegetables.
Okay, and cheese on the vegetables?
And cheese, yeah. Sprinkling some cheese on your broccoli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. All right, so you said those come from the American Diabetes Association, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the My Native plate comes off IHS, mm-hmm. and then the other comes, you can do some meal planning or recipes on meal prep from the American Diabetes Association, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we know it's November, the holidays are around the corner, do you have any eating or snacking tips for the upcoming holiday season? Does it mean you need to deprive yourself, or can I have a little bit of like hot chocolate or eggnog or, I don't know, peppermint bark? What's the rules? Is it moderation is key? Can I have soda? What advice do you have?
So as far as your sugary beverages are concerned, it's always good to try to at least look for your non-sugary options. Try to incorporate, some diet sodas or even the low-calorie, no-sugar-added beverages like our diet cranberry juice or even Crystal Light. Because we do want to have something sweet,
Water's okay too, right?
And then water's okay too,
and could I put fruit in water?
Yeah.
Like infuse it or something like that?
Yeah, definitely doing infused waters. And the reason that I like to incorporate the diet sodas too is because you're going to want something else besides water. I mean, water is good, it's delicious, and we want to drink as much of it as possible. But for the most part, I could understand how you would kind of get tired of drinking, water all day. So I always like to make sure that people have options too, because if you're going to take something away, at least giving people options so that way they're more likely to stick to those changes that they're wanting to make.
Okay, so in other words, can you have things like pumpkin pie, or is it moderation, or is it just if I have diabetes or pre-diabetes, do I just have to skip it, or is it moderation?
So one of the things that might be helpful too is trying your veggies first. So eating, it's so
having your green beans first.
Having your green beans first.
And is it just one day, or should you practice this all the time? So you should have your vegetables first for lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Mm-hmm. I know I made my husband yesterday, like he was jokingly, I made a whole box of mushrooms and some spinach with one egg. He goes, that was a lot, but for breakfast and lunch. But so is that something you should do? So you should have the vegetables at all three meals, right?
So
fruit?
Ideally having the vegetables at all three meals, and then and during the holidays too, like still trying to get as much vegetables as possible. But I understand that it's understandable that there are times where, of course, you're going to want, a slice of pumpkin pie. You're going to want some of the bark.
Peppermint bark.
The peppermint bark.
I was looking at that today. Yep.
And definitely, definitely incorporating that, but also thinking about something that you could do with your family even after you eat. One thing that my family used to do after we would have a meal together is we would all wash dishes, and then we'd all go for a walk. So that way, you're not just having this big, delicious meal, but you're also doing something to sort of help build up, or you're doing something to sort of help with the
you're moving.
Yeah.
Right, you're moving afterwards. Do you think that I know there's been a lot of discussion lately, and I know this is not sort of your field, but the 10,000 steps, do you think that's a good idea? Or I know after you check with your medical provider, but do you find that just in general for diabetes and weight management, 10,000 steps is a good idea?
So I think it's always good to set a goal for yourself, even if it's 5,000 steps a day, depending on where I think it depends on where you're at. So assessing to see where you're at, and setting a SMART goal for yourself for something that is specific, that is measurable, attainable, timely, something that that you could do, because again, you're working towards making lifestyle changes.
Right, and not everybody can do 4 or 5 miles a day. They don't have the time, the energy, or whatever. And,
slowly working your way up towards the 10,000 steps as well can definitely sort of help motivate you. Because the last thing you want to do is, aim for the 10,000 steps and then crash kind of halfway through and then not want to do it again. So,
That's why you're such a great RD, and that you understand baby steps and SMART goals and doing things like that. Mm-hmm. I know you obviously love what you do and making a difference and impacting people's lives. One thing that you've been doing with us is the Food for Thought videos. Mm-hmm. And that's with the University of Arizona College of Medicine Culinary Medicine program. And I know what you're doing with Olivia is making these indigenous recipes, and you're adding the health tips and the nutritional benefits. Do you, I guess, do you enjoy doing this, the videos, and learning a lot? And do you have any tips for our listeners, like, watch the videos or try different recipes? Any suggestions?
Yeah, so I do encourage watching the videos. There's a lot of really colorful, really great recipes that were put together using a lot of ingredients that you can actually find inside of the grocery stores or even on Amazon. So all of the ingredients are easy to find. And then on top of that too, think about different ways where you can sort of make the recipe your own. Whether it is changing out the oil or changing out one of the vegetables or changing out, the seeds that we use.
That's a good tip. I mean, I know as you were mentioning before kale, I'm like, yeah, that's not my favorite.
Yeah, and if it's not your favorite, then
The broccoli would be better, or green beans. And then trying things like in the air fryer, right?
Yeah. Trying it in the air fryer. Like we might make a recipe where we saute it, and then you might bake it, and then it might be something that is more suitable for your palate. So if you make something baked that we made sauteed and you prefer it more, but it's getting you to eat more vegetables, then yeah, definitely cook it that way.
Okay. All right. So, what programs does Native Health have? A lot of different programs for individuals that are either interested in nutrition, diabetes, or diabetes prevention. I know we've got the garden, the traditional garden, but I know you're also involved with the SDPI, again, which is the Special Diabetes Program for Indians under IHS here. What kind of classes do they have and that do you assist with?
So I have been assisting the community health worker, Amber Labahi here, who's really excellent, really great, and she's been putting together a lot of really wonderful classes that I've been helping out with. She did wrap up a series, I believe it was called...
Oh, the Eagle series.
Maybe. That might be one of hers too, but it was the My Relationship with Food.
Yeah.
And this was I think it was a 4 or 5 part series where she talked about she related it all to the medicine wheel, and she talked about the importance of these foods and, why it's important to keep our kitchen clean and why it's important to, she incorporated more than just the nutritional part, but also the cleansing portion as well. And then at the end of every class, she did make a recipe, and she made it. And it was something that she could put together pretty quickly at the end of an hour and a half long class. So it was something that was quick and easy. And all of the meals were really delicious that she made. She made things like quinoa cakes, and she made a really good chicken tikka masala over rice.
Oh, that sounds good.
That a lot of the kids really enjoyed. And then she made something with the wild rice too. I can't remember what it was, but it was a lot of people did really enjoy that one because they had mentioned that it was using wild rice in a way that they hadn't really thought of. And then I believe they're doing a series on blue corn as well with
Alana Yazzie.
Yeah.
The Fancy Navajo. Those classes are full, but yes. I know those filled really fast. Those were very popular.
And I can't remember. I believe it's with I believe it's with SDPI. I could be incorrect, but I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's something that I sat in on the second class, and she did. Yeah. So those are some of the classes that I've been able to help out with. And
Alana Yazzie's quite popular. She'll be here for the 4th one, and they get their books. Their cookbooks. What is it? We just had Alana on the show. The Fancy Navajo. Oh, I can't remember the name of the cookbook. But anyway, I bought a couple copies of that. But yeah. So if somebody thinks if they're concerned that they might have diabetes or prediabetes or whatever, the first thing would be to call and make an appointment with a provider, correct? Mm-hmm. And then the provider would do a referral to you, or could somebody just call you and say, hey, Tara, I heard you, I've met you, I really want to come see you. Can they do that, or do they have to go through a provider first?
I always encourage going through a provider.
Okay.
And then getting a referral to me. That would be, I think that would be one of the, it would be a good process.
And you're not judgmental. I know that just from working with you. No. Because I know, like, when I'm eating pizza in front of you, you don't say anything and you don't look at me like with the side eye going, no. So I always appreciate that about you, that you're never, you're not intimidating. You're always kind and warm and loving and lovely. And I think you're a pleasure. Question for you. If somebody is diabetic or pre-diabetic, do they prescribe meds here like insulin or other, and I'm not familiar with all the different medications, but does Native Health and do you do that, or does the provider do that?
The provider will do the prescribing, and then I just more of help with the education portion. Yeah, so I do more of the education portion, but the provider does the prescribing. That's outside of my scope.
Okay, and so if somebody's newly diagnosed, they would come to you and you would be able to sit down and talk about like My Native Plate and insulin and all of that? All right, Tara. So when we've been talking about all these different things, what has been your most successful recipe or which has not worked so well for you? And I keep thinking of your story about the pods. So anyway.
But so my least successful recipe is, so this one was when I was brand new health educator. I thought I put together like this amazing recipe. I thought like, this is it. Like, this is going to change how people think about healthy eating. And it was a breakfast burrito with the whole wheat tortilla, egg whites, and spinach, and a little bit of salt sprinkled inside of it. And so I went ahead and I even put together the recipe, and so it doesn't matter. Well, anyways, so I put it together and I had them all make it, and everybody was like taking bites out of it, saying, "This is so good." And then I went to go look in the trash can at the end of the lesson, and everybody had like thrown them all away. And then when I looked at the reviews about it, they said it had no flavor, it wasn't good. And then I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I worked so hard on this recipe. And then I went and talked about it with my previous supervisor. And she's like, well, let's see. Like, did you ask what they would like to have? Did you ask what they would like to eat? And then I told her no. And so she told me, she's like, well, this is why we do surveys, and this is why it's really important, and this is why we want to make sure that we get buy-in from the community that we're going out to help, so that way we create things that they like and they enjoy. And so I went ahead and redid the recipe, added some cheese.
I was just thinking cheese would probably be pretty good.
Added some cheese, and then had them make a pico de gallo, so that way it would add a little bit more color. And then I just went ahead and did the entire egg, like instead of doing just the egg whites.
Did they like it better?
They did.
Nobody threw it in the trash?
Nobody threw it in the trash. And then on top of that too, I did learn that you need to reduce, like to cook it with the lid on, so that way it doesn't keep all of the moisture inside, so it's not as runny with the eggs and the spinach or the kale. And so it wasn't as watery or runny or anything like that. And then it was definitely more enjoyable. So that was probably the the first most unsuccessful thing that I have ever made.
But it was a good learning lesson. And I think, and then, when you're talking about working with the public and people coming to you or classes, it's always asking what they want to know, not what you think they need to learn or teach them.
It was a very humbling moment.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, it's been totally a great hour to spend with you. I've learned a lot. 1, about the pods. I think I'm going to be dreaming about that forever. 2, about egg whites now with whole wheat, with whole wheat tortillas. But how can our listeners find more information about Native Health's Diabetes Prevention Program? And how can they contact you or make an appointment?
So if you are an established patient here, then you can go ahead and ask your provider if you'd like to see me and make an appointment with me.
At all 3 locations?
At all 3 locations, yes. So I am at Central on Mondays, Tuesday mornings, and Thursdays, and then Mesa on Wednesdays, and then I'm at the West location on Fridays.
Awesome. I've heard the best things about you. And truly, for anybody listening, Tara is the most humble, kind, and non-judgmental. And I appreciate that about you a lot. So,
thank you.
And I'm so glad you came on, and I loved your stories, and we'll have to have you back on. It is Diabetes Awareness Month. If you're not sure or have any questions or concerns, give Tara a call. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and 90.7 FM KRDP. Our executive producer is Susan Levy. Sound engineer is Javier Quiroga. We hope you will tune in again next week. If you have any questions, please reach us at nativetalkaz@listen2krdp.com.